sorry for myself. They are willing to just be there with me. If I'm sick or if I'm down, they want to be close. They are a constant, steady presence that I think is the mark of a truly loving, faithful relationship. And I think this is what unconditional love looks like. But even more than that, my dogs have been part of my worship experience. As I think all of you know, every Maundy Thursday, we have what we call the watch. From the time they strip the altar on Maundy Thursday until services begin on Friday, people sign up for 1-hour blocks of time. It's hearkening to the words that Jesus said, will you not wait with me 1 hour? So the first year that we did this, a long, long time ago, in my infinite wisdom, I signed up for the 2 o'clock slot, a.m. The closer we got to it, the more I thought, I am going to be in an unlocked church in Whitefish Bay all by myself at 2 o'clock in the morning. So I said to Barbara Williamson, who was the assistant priest at the time, will anybody care if I bring my dog? She said, Bonnie, at 2 o'clock in the morning, no one's going to know if you bring your dog. So my 107-pound German Shepherd, Sophie, and I showed up at 2 o'clock in the chapel, and it was absolutely one of the most moving experiences of my life. I don't know whether it was the security of having Sophie there, or whether it was just sort of her presence. But there was a holiness to it that I am absolutely convinced would not have been there had I just been in the chapel hearing every creak and, and thinking somebody's here with me. So in many ways, I think my dogs are living, breathing examples of the kind of love we experience in God. God loves us no matter how much or how little we reciprocate. God loves us in the here and now, and that's love is not contingent upon us doing or not doing anything. As Paul said in his famous letter to the Corinthians, love is patient, love is kind, love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It's not irritable or resentful. This is the kind of love I experience in my dogs. And I know that for all of you who have had an animal in your lives, you can relate. There's an old hymn, here I am back to being the choir rat. God is love, and where love is, God himself is there. It's the faithful, steadfast love I experience from my dogs every day that's a tangible reminder of the love of God in my life. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. So I'm going to talk about Kip O'Reilly Bell. We don't know if he was actually Irish, but being a part of our family, there must have been a little bit of Irish in him. So Kip is right there. I love to oil paint, and one day he loved this black blanket that we had, and he would always sleep on that or rest on that when he'd jump up on the furniture. So we try to make sure the blanket was there before he got up on the furniture, right? So, but he loved that blanket, and one winter, Sybil wrapped him up in this blanket because it was so cold in January in our house. I'd like to keep it about 62 in there, I think. So we're all wrapped up in blankets, but he was wrapped up, and I took a picture of him, and then I painted that, and that's what he is he's wrapped up. But he came to live with us, and I should tell you, he was just a few months old, but in our family, so I had always grown up with a pet. My earliest memory was having a little dog, and then when my mom remarried, we got a dog. It was a Canadian Cocker, which is a all black dog, and Candy was her name, and she was a delightful dog. And so in my family, being an only child, It seemed like I always had a pet, a turtle or a gerbil, or a hamster, or whatever it might have been. But in Sybil's family, she's one of 10 kids, and pets were kind of scarce in her family. But so of our 4 kids, the 3 oldest had always lobbied for a pet and were never successful at it. It wasn't until our youngest, our son, Anders, came along, and one year, he was going to be 8 years old on his next birthday in April. But before that, at Christmas time, we said, well, what do you want for Christmas? He said, I'd really like a baby brother. And we thought, that's not going to happen. So he kept lobbying, and then all of a sudden, a baby brother turned into a dog. And that seemed a lot more feasible. So one day we went out to the 7-mile place, and they had a whole lineup of dogs. And we went down that lineup of dogs, and we went through all of the dogs in there, and it just didn't seem like there was a dog there for us, and especially for Anders. And when we got to the end of the line, there was this little couple-month-old puppy, schnauzer, well, a schnoodle, a combination of schnauzer and poodle, right? And just the cutest little dog, and all of a sudden he perked up and jumped up on his cage like, this is the people. These are the ones that I've been looking for. And we just fell in love with him immediately. So Kip came home with us that night. And we left him downstairs, but the problem was he didn't like to be left alone down there by himself in this strange new house. So the next night, and from then on, for every night, he slept at the foot of our bed. So, as you might suspect, we allowed him up on the furniture. He slept at the foot of our bed. We were kind of rather indulgent with the little guy, but he was just the sweetest disposition and the sweetest dog. So the thing about Kip is that he really began to, as I looked at this, and especially as I thought about this when I was invited to be a presenter for this, that what was it about him that was really this depth of spirituality, this depth of seeing God in him? And it's kind of interesting. I'd always known he was this compassionate little dog, this very loving little animal. And much like you were saying, Bonnie, you see the very presence and compassion of God in an animal like that. He had this kind of disposition that he was always kind and friendly to people. There was a few people that I think scared him. Guys with beards, for example, were scary to him. So I'm glad none of you have beards. Well, Seth, he might have liked you. So, but for the most part, he just was always happy to see people, and I think especially happy to see us, come in the door. That was his way of greeting was just really compassionate. So I really saw in that, the love of God. He was unconditional about it, completely unconditional about that love. And I think part of that was that he was in a loving home as well. I think it went both ways for us. And that just strengthened in each of us that kind of loving compassion. He brought out creativity in me, and I was always talking to him, and he was always talking back. I just want you to know that. So it wasn't like I was talking to myself. I just want to be clear. But here's an example of one of the poems that I wrote about him. It's called "My Name is Kip. As I say, I say, as I often do to my dog, "What do you know, little Joe?" And the look on his face says, "What do any of us really know?" Kip philosophy, Kipper dog, the philosopher. And the look on his face says, "What I want to know, is there a treat for me? You're having a treat. Yeah, but I'm regulating my blood sugar. It's still a treat. You got one for me?" "Oh, you know I do." So I give him a greenie, and the look on his face says, "Thanks, and don't call me Joe." So he was wonderful. Another thing that I just want to share with you about him is a few years ago I was somewhat struggling to really enter into contemplative prayer. And the one thing about contemplative prayer that is so marvelous and wonderful is to sort of let go of the things somewhat that are around you and to really allow yourself to enter into the present moment, this eternal moment, if you will, or this moment of the eternal now. And so I was walking the dog one day and I was thinking, my gosh, here is this living little creature who knows how to live in the moment. He is just so engaged in smelling the smells that are around him and in sensing what's happening in this moment right here. He's not worried about what's going to happen tomorrow. He's not worried about what's going to happen or what has happened in the past, but he was so immersed in the now. And I think Kip was a way of my seeing how we can live in the presence of this moment, this time. And so he was a really good example for me on that. I have one more poem that I want to share with you. This is called "Something's Coming." I heard two leaves dancing on the sidewalk, dried and dead, dancing their zombie dance. And I said to Kip, "Oh no, I know that sound, the sound of fall, when all the dried and dead leaves dance their zombie dance, longing for Halloween, and the dying of the summer and the days of warmth and living things. But we have another month, don't we, Kip?" And Kip said to me, "You're hoping to hold off the inevitable, aren't you?" And then he continued sniffing and the waning smells of summer and the scents of other dogs. So those are some of the things that I just wanted to share with you about how I saw in Kip the love of God, the deep compassion, and utter, and then the very presence of God in the eternal moment, in this now. So thank you.
I've been an animal lover all my life, and I have to say my family hasn't always approved. I still remember when I was in elementary school walking past a dead squirrel at the bottom of a tree, and I picked him up and put him in a bag and brought him home. I'm not sure what I was thinking. I guess I was hoping somebody would help him, but my mother was not very happy with me. I've also had pets all my life, mostly cats, although I've been lucky enough to be owned by 3 dogs. I currently have 2 dogs and 2 cats and a couple tanks of fish. When I got my second dog 15 years ago, it was immediately apparent that he was a people lover. He always wanted to greet, and still does, everyone he sees. My neighbor called him a party waiting to happen. After we brought him home, I started reading about therapy animals. And if you're not familiar with that, these are animals, they're mostly dogs, but sometimes cats, birds, and even llamas, and miniature horses, that are trained to come into nursing homes, hospitals, libraries, and all kinds of places to have social interactions with people. I'd also begun to notice about that time that when we brought my dog with us on visits to my father-in-law, who had dementia, that he always responded to the dog. He'd had dogs, and he didn't always know who we were or what was going on. He certainly didn't know who the dog was, but he always responded. He petted him and talked to him no matter how he was feeling. It kind of brought him out of whatever place he was in. So Caesar and I, my dog, became a registered therapy team in 2010. 2 years later, I also registered my cat, Juliet, a sweet-tempered, laid-back cat who loved to snuggle on laps. I have pictures, there's one on the floor, but there's a couple on there. With both of them, we went out on visits once or twice a week. We went all over the place. We visited our local assisted living dementia center, worked with adults with mental and physical disabilities, visited at the hospice unit of a local hospital, and went to college campuses, including Marquette, all over the Milwaukee area to help students and faculty distress before exams. Whether it was brightening up a day in the life of a senior who didn't get too many visitors, or comforting families who were sitting vigil with dying loved ones, or reminding a stressed college student of her much-loved pet at home, these visits were among the most sacred work I've ever done. As Greg and Bonnie both have said, I mean, when you watch those connections and the healing that they bring, you can really see it's a physical manifestation of God's love. Caesar began having health issues last year at 14, and I had to retire him. Despite a lot of tests, we aren't quite sure what is wrong with him, but learning to live with the fact that his time is short has been a real lesson in mindfulness and gratitude. I'm still doing therapy work with my second therapy cat, Romeo. We do Shakespeare names in our family, who I adopted shortly after losing Juliet 3 years ago. He's a younger cat with a very different personality, and we are still learning new ways to interact with the people we visit. On that note, I want to end, since I'm talking about cats, I thought I would share what I thought cats teach us about spirituality. I think anybody who ever has had a cat will agree. I think they remind us how truly insignificant we are in the greater scheme of things. Because after all, there's no such thing as a cat owner. We're all just the cat staff. Thank you.
Well, now we'd like to open it up to your questions and comments. So I've got a couple of microphones here that we can all pass around. So I'll give one on this side, and then you can pass it around, and I'll give one over to you. No, if you would like to ask a question, there you are. Thank you. All right. Any thoughts, anyone like that, or comments? Yeah, Carol.
Hello? Hello?
Should be.
I just want to be the first because I have to leave. But on a more serious note, after having the dog and puppy, is I don't know how many of you have had to put your animal to sleep. But if you're with them and, they inject them with the relax, and they stop the heart. It's not the heart that bothers me. It's like you can actually feel the spirit or something going. It's really hard. And I guess animals don't really have any spirit, I think, but I agree with everything else you said, but that feel, what they call it, something else.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That is really a poignant, hard moment that we can all relate to. And I like to hold out all kinds of mystery for what happens with all of God's creatures. I think God is this generative source for all life, and I like to think that whatever comes from God returns to God, and so I don't think we know. I don't know. I don't think an animal has the same kind of soul as a human, but I think in the same ways that all of us can kind of intuitively say that there's a relationship there and there's really important life there. I like to hold out hope that maybe we will, that this being of a pet somehow can transcend death. I don't know. It's a real mystery. But thank you for being vulnerable about that. I loved the, and Carol is thinking about maybe bringing her horse for the pet blessing. That would be amazing. That would be. Okay. Yeah. All right. Take care. I just wanted to comment on that last joke about the cat. I've never really thought about how, like it's a double-edged sword of your dog's unconditional love. I've never owned a cat, but the dog, it is such a source of like God's love and compassion. But maybe like the shadow side of that is the way that they do make you feel like the center of the universe, like all the time. And it's one of the reasons we love them so much, is because they make us feel so incredibly special just for like being in a chair next to them or something. But a cat kind of reminds you of the big picture of things. So I thought that was really fun.
Our great insignificance.
Working? Yeah. Any tricks or I don't know how can I put it? The fear of dogs. I mean, I don't know. I just seem to have this fear of dogs. I know that it is one of the reasons is that the dogs in Tanzania are watchdogs. So they are supposed to be mean. But still, like my son is so scared. We have tried and tried, but I don't know whether it is in the genes or it is. How do you train somebody to be comfortable? Does the dog understand when somebody is scared? What can I do to improve that situation?
I'd like to see, Anne, if you, because you are working with therapy pets, and do you ever encounter that kind of fear that Oswald is talking about?
Well, it's interesting. I don't know that I can offer too many suggestions, but one of the very first things you're taught as a therapy handler is to assess the room when you walk in, because you will be able to see if there's somebody who is afraid of animals. And I have run into that, especially on the hospice unit. There was a nurse who was deathly afraid of dogs. And so then you do everything you can to avoid that person so you don't make the situation worse, which is somewhat hard to do with a therapy animal because, like I said, my dog always wants to greet everybody, but that makes things worse. Actually, I think maybe the best thing you could do is try to put him in a situation where there are animals, but he doesn't have to encounter the animals unless he wants to. You need a friendlier animal, a more social animal. Trying to think of, because I mean, going to the Humane Society, which would be hard for him, but there are programs there. Boy Scouts and Scouting sometimes has involvement with animals. But if you could find something like that did include a therapy animal who's well-behaved, well-trained, will be calm, predictable, and friendly, let
me just say real quick, Bonnie, that's a really good suggestion, Ann, is to contact the Humane Society. Our son works there, and they are very good at helping households, including the animals, especially the animals themselves, acclimate to those environments, but working as well with people. So I think the Humane Society was a really good suggestion.
I was just going to say that, I mean, if you know of somebody who has a dog, that your son could just go walking with them. I mean, doesn't have to interact with the dog, doesn't have to do anything, but just being around the dog. And I only say this because when I was teaching horseback riding, we occasionally would have kids who came and were just terrified of the horses. And of course, you know, that's 1,500 pounds of stupid, so, you know. But if you could just have them be around the horses without having to interact with them, sometimes that helped them to get over the fear.
Any other questions or comments? Great.
Go back to Bonnie's image of being with her German Shepherd in the chapel. I don't have a whole lot to add to that, but I just wanted to hold up that like such. You said it was just such a holy experience, and having the dog kind of there protecting you in this, like as a part of Jesus's journey. You know, Jesus was just looking for like people to kind of be with him, and he couldn't find it. And then here you are keeping watch with Jesus, but also like your dog is keeping watch with you. I thought that was just really cool. And so for the record, your pets are always welcome at the vigil forever.
There is a funny sequence to that, because one of the guys who was part of the parish at the time was the person who followed me at the 3 o'clock slot. And Eric had a Harley. So we heard Eric coming about 3.5 blocks away. And when he started to come up the steps on the Beaumont side, Sophie got up and just stood in the middle of the aisle. And Eric came in, he's in full leather, and he said, "I'll just stay here, it's fine." But after that, I've done the watch, I think, every year until the pandemic hit. I have never done a watch without a dog. And it really is a holy experience.
Go ahead, Sybil, sorry.
I wanted to share a story that I read that had gone viral this week on the internet. And it was a picture of a jar of Hershey Kisses in a clear jar. Have you seen that? And it said, "Heaven's Kisses." And it was for dogs who were ready to be euthanized, who were on their way to heaven. And as many people know, chocolate and dogs don't go together. So for their final journey, they would get a kiss, a chocolate kiss, because why not?
Yeah.
And this one vet had offered this as an entree into heaven, where you will get chocolate. So there you go.
Does anyone do TikTok here? Like, I mean, I know TikTok is mostly for kids, but it's actually not just for kids, because there's a lot of really interesting, serious stuff. But TikTok has these like 20-second videos, 1-minute videos. They can go up to 3-minute videos, but there are a ton of really funny pet videos. It's almost like, you know, America's Funniest Home Videos. Like, so it's like that, but it's just like there's millions of them. I mean, there's just so many, and you don't have to watch a show, and there's not like kind of silly commentary underneath. And some of them are silly, some are crude, some are very lighthearted. But I do recommend getting the app TikTok, and then you have to kind of search dogs, and there's some really like kind of lighthearted stuff that will, you know, just lighten the day. So, resource.
I
guess this is the opposite a little bit because it's not so lighthearted, only it makes my heart light, was the story of my granddog who comes to stay with us periodically. She usually lives in Mequon, but will come and stay with us. When Bob was in his last years of dementia, the dog always slept with Bob, and the dog would not even put a single foot on my bed. Two beds side by side, would never put a single foot on my bed. And Bob, in his last year, was prone to getting up when he shouldn't, and the dog was right there and would make a sound. This goes to you, Anne, really understanding. The dog would make a sound in her throat, which would alert me. It was sort of like a bell, would alert me, and then the dog would put her paw on Bob's shoulder, and Bob would lie down and go back to sleep again. But somehow or other, this dog, who was not ours, did not live with us on a regular basis, but knew that this person needed some attention. And then in the morning, she would be off and doing her usual whatever, but never was strong with Bob. She's a yellow lab of great strength, very slim. But she would never, she's a lap sitter. Shouldn't be, but she is. She sits on the sofa and so forth. But always gentle with Bob, which I found very interesting that she just intuitively knows. Maybe if we all kept our mouths shut and were a little more intuitive and listened to the Spirit of God, maybe we could be more gentle. And with your sermon this morning was wonderful, understanding other people a little bit better.
I just want to share something about Kip. The depth of his empathy was astounding. He'd be at home while Sybil and I were at work, and Anders was off to school, and my parents would always come and pick him up. And over the years, he was really like their dog too, and they just loved him, and he loved them. He loved going out to the park with them and so forth. Well, my mother has a thyroid condition, and Kip developed a thyroid condition. And then, near the end of his life, the last 5 years, he got diabetes, and I have diabetes. So I just find it astonishing that animals can be so, like you're saying, Lynn, just so empathetic and so understanding and have this depth of being able to know a person is different than another person and needs something that we don't have, or may not see. And I just really, I think, what I look at is the way in which God is just journeys with us in our own suffering. So can our pets. And it's just the animals who are our companions around us. So, does anybody have any other comments? Otherwise, Bonnie will lead us in a closing prayer.
We're going to end with final prayer, which I think everybody knows, and I have prayer books on the table. Oh, here I am. Yeah, anybody have trouble hearing me? I didn't think so. It's on page 833. It's prayer number 62, and is the prayer attributed to St. Francis. And I encourage you, if you've been touched by an animal, to think about that animal as we say this together. So, everybody find it? Yep. Lord, make us instruments of your peace. Where there is hatred, let us sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is discord, union. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. Grant that we may not to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is dying that we are born to eternal life. Amen. Thank you all very much. It was fun. It was really fun. I just have, I love to have her with